All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Podward State, the official podcast of Podward State. My name is Matthew Ogden.
Matt Palizzi.
Sam Brungo. Last week we sat down with our good friend Oyama to talk about his 100+ days spent on Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C. That was an awesome episode that you guys should definitely check out. Today we have another important episode. This one's really exciting because no matter who you're planning on voting for this fall, it's so important that you vote. Joining us today, we have Laura Shadle, who is the North Central Region Director for Pennsylvania Young Democrats, and we have Ezra Nanes, who is 2018 candidate for Pennsylvania State Senate. Ezra, Laura, welcome guys. How are we doing?
Thanks, Sam. Doing great.
Doing well. Happy to be here and to be a resource for everything elections-wise in Center County.
How did you get interested in politics, and how did you start out in this career path that you've taken?
So I would have been getting involved in my mid-teens, which was like the late Bush era into the early Obama era. I first got really interested just because I was very anti-Iraq war. I was that kind of stuff. So I understood what was happening at a national level. I kind of started paying attention more to local organizing when the Obama campaign in 2008, when I was in high school, they ran such a sharp local operation and outreach operation that it was very easy for people of all ages to get involved. And I started just as a volunteer because I wanted to be, it was so contagious. I wanted to be a part of that. And then I realized I was like kind of good at it, and that was exciting. So I just, I stayed involved in the local elections after that and kind of got, which is a very different scene. And the local Democratic Party, the Center County Democratic Party just kind of kept me there, and then got involved in different causes like healthcare reform. And it was just so enticing. I couldn't stop. And just the community around the local political scene, especially. I remember County Commissioner Michael Pipe. I met him when he was just out of college, working downtown and preparing to run for Congress, over 10 years ago. And we've all of us have known each other for so long that I think one of the greatest things that you build this great community just surrounded by people with a common goal of helping, organizing around issues that matter to you in your communities. And so it's, I've done a lot since then, worked on different campaigns. I was the executive director of the Center County Democratic Committee for a couple years. Now I currently work in Center County government as jury commissioner, and I also do district outreach work for State Representative Scott Conklin. So it all seems to be a continuous path, but just happy to be involved in this kind of stuff either way.
Awesome. And Ezra, I'm from State College, so in 2018, obviously I saw your name on yard signs all over the place. What led you to run for Pennsylvania State Senate back in 2018?
Thanks, Sam. Absolutely. I love State College, and that was a really incredible experience. I actually worked really closely with Laura during the campaign, but I've lived in the area for 10 years. I've got my MBA at Penn State, and my wife and I settled here, and I worked at a local company called AccuWeather. And, it was really the 2016 election that just made us realize we needed to be more than just engaged voters. We needed to be actively involved in the political process. So, 2016, I'll just be honest, didn't go the way we were hoping it would. And we started organizing just in our community, bringing people together. We started postcarding, calling elected officials. And after a point, it hit us that we were seeing votes out of Harrisburg, not even out of DC, out of Harrisburg, that didn't reflect what we thought should be happening. And we said, you know what, we need a vote. We need actually a vote there. We need to be in government. And so just sitting around a table talking with some friends as we were planning some action, somebody said, have you ever thought about running against Jake Corman? And honestly, my first reaction was, who's Jake Corman? And so, that tells you the level of knowledge I had at that time. But then we started looking at it, and I realized what we were talking about. And once the seed was planted, we knew that we were going to do it because it had to be done. You can't have sitting elected officials in a seat for, year after year, election after election without anybody challenging them. And Some incumbents can become so entrenched that nobody even bothers to run because it's such an uphill battle. But we not only believed that we could win, but that we could really make an impact with our campaign. And so we chose to run. And it was honestly a transformational experience, one of the greatest periods of my life, of my wife's life, our kids. You know, they were just 5 and 7, and they were so inspired by it all. We got to know people across the county, across Huntingdon, Mifflin, Juniata, Center, statewide. We just came to know people, and it was just really incredible. So we didn't win the election, but we had a real impact. We did win Center County, and connecting with voters on campus was a real central part of that. I mean, I spent a good part of Election Day in the hub because that really matters. You know, voters on campus here at Penn State have a huge influence over who gets elected in Pennsylvania. It's really incredible. So I am thrilled to be here today talking with you because whoever's watching, if you're a student at Penn State, your vote really matters. You can elect people in Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania, where our state government sits. You can elect people locally here in State College, and you can elect people in Washington, D.C., and that's really powerful. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you guys for having this forum to get information out there.
How has the pandemic impacted how people are able to vote and how people are going to vote?
So what they did was it was a bipartisan elections reform bill, and one of the major things it allowed for was vote by mail. You know, groundbreaking for Pennsylvania. We never had that. It also got rid of straight party voting, where you couldn't just fill in the bubble for your party. You have to actually vote individually for candidates. So it did a number of things, but it was really that vote by mail provision that when the pandemic hit, counties were able to look at this and say, okay, we actually remarkably have something in place where we can put out a plan to make sure that people can vote safely. Because otherwise, we knew that, I think everyone knows, the turnout is going to be astronomical this year. I mean, we've seen that based on numbers of ballots requested already. We've seen that with early voting numbers in other states. It would not have been safe to just have these kind of lines. You cannot socially distance the kind of lines that people are anticipating at the polls. Center County especially has really built an entire program around making sure that vote by mail is accessible, having drop boxes, there's also satellite vote. It's basically early voting, satellite voting office here at the Bryce Jordan Center, which is very safe, very spaced out, and it's running pretty well. We can get into the details of all that stuff later, but it's something we've been relying pretty heavily on here, and the voters seem to agree with it here based on the over 30,000 people who have applied for ballots thus far, that this is going to just be a really safe, contactless way that they're going to be able to cast their vote and, not be at risk, especially with COVID-19 cases rising in our county in particular.
What is the difference between an absentee ballot and a mail-in ballot? Because I know I was confused about that at first. And I know a lot of people are also kind of trying to figure out, what's what.
What happens is when you go online to apply, it gives you that option first. It's asking, are you going to be away, or are you in the military, or do you have a disability? Because if you click that you have a reason, basically, it's going to send you to the absentee form. If you do not put any reason, it just takes you to mail-in. Now, here's the way this works. It is literally the same form. No excuse mail-in. It makes absentee redundant. It doesn't actually need to exist functionally for this to work, which is why we usually just tell people just do the standard mail-in, or if people are printing out the application. Basically, this is one of those things where the actual word absentee is still in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and so legally they could not separate them, or they could separate them. They couldn't get rid of that. And so it was just a weird technicality like that. Because I know a lot of people are like, this is confusing. Why not just get rid of the other one? Which logically makes sense. But yeah, it's just a technical thing. As far as the form itself and what it allows you to do is literally the same thing. So you can't go wrong either way.
So you don't have to go to a polling place. You don't have to go physically anywhere if you don't want to. And during COVID, if you're concerned about your health, or if you're sick, that ballot will come to you in your mailbox, and you can fill it out in wherever you live. And you can I actually don't think you even need to put a stamp on it. You put it back in the mail, and your vote will be counted. So that's amazing. You can also take that ballot, fill it out, and put it in a drop box. There are a number of them around Center County, or you can bring it to your county elections office. So whether it's absentee or mail-in, they're essentially, as Laura said, the same thing, but it gets sent to you, you fill it out, you can mail it, or put it in a drop box, and you voted.
Yeah, so I remember seeing in the news a couple of weeks ago, there was like a small little controversy about the Pennsylvania ballot system, where like there's kind of an uproar over what they called naked ballots. Like the ballot process is a little complex. You have to put the ballot into 2 envelopes in order for it to be actually counted. Can you guys like explain a little bit about how that works, just so the people listening at home know exactly what to do to make sure that their voices get heard?
Will a ballot count without, they're calling it naked ballots. What they mean by naked ballots, that means there are 2 envelopes that you receive. And they're saying, will the vote count if you do not put the ballot after you're finished filling it out in the smaller secrecy envelope before you put it in the larger one? So they did rule that if you don't follow those instructions, that your vote essentially will not be validated. When you get your ballot, you fill it out, do everything, and then refold it, and there's a smaller envelope that you put it inside and seal. And then you put that one in the bigger envelope. That's the voter declaration. And then you seal that, and you make, the very big thing too is make sure that you sign. There is a voter declaration on, there's a part that you sign on that bigger envelope. You sign that, and then you're done. Then that's the process. But that is basically what I think a lot of voting rights advocates were concerned about too, was that people, would miss those instructions and like votes would be invalidated. So it's, the way to combat that is just to get as much information out there as possible to make sure people know to use both envelopes, and just follow the directions closely.
What's the deadline first to apply for when you can actually apply for your absentee and mail-in ballots? But what's also the deadline to send them in as well once you receive them?
Basically, the major deadlines coming up would be, you won't be able, this will precede anything. You won't be able to do any of this if you're not registered to vote in Center County. This is very important for students too, if you want to utilize any of the options that we have here. That is October 19th. But you need to make sure that you are registered in Center County. There are plenty of ways to look up if you're registered here, and make sure that's all good. And then when you are, and you want to apply for your mail-in ballot, you have until October 27th. That is the deadline to actually apply for the ballot. And what the county is doing, the work and dedication they're putting in at the elections office is phenomenal. So the plan, per Commissioner Pipe, the plan is, because October 27th, that's only a few days before the election, as we get down to those last couple days, so really like the week before, for any last minute applications that are coming in, they're really tracking how much time it would take to get there. So the deadline for them to be received by the county is by 8 p.m. on election night. And those can be, again, that can be Dropbox, that can be directly to the elections office, or that can be mailed, as long as they are postmarked by November 3rd. Then they will still be able to be counted. But what the county is doing to ensure that people's ballots are received in time is, say somebody applies for a mail-in ballot on, like, at like 3 o'clock. The deadline would be 5 p.m. at like 3 o'clock on October 27th. That's cutting it very, very close. So what they would actually do is determine how much time it would actually take to be received by mail. And then they, instead of just doing the standard process, election staff will literally take that ballot and drive it to the PO box that is closest to where that person lives to ensure it gets there that much more quickly. And that's not like standard either. That's just how much dedication Center County Gov is putting into this. But that's pretty much it. So it goes, make sure you're registered to vote by October 19th. And then make sure you have applied for your ballot by October 27th. And then actual voting is just in-person voting. If that's something people wanted to do, you can do that on November 3rd.
Yeah, needless to say, the sooner you can do all of these things, the better, because we are, just over 3 weeks away from Election Day. So
As far as in-person voting, where in State College can we do that? Specifically, where on Penn State campus, and what will that look like this year?
For students living off campus, if they do not want to do the mail-in at all and just vote in person on Election Day, off campus, it will just be like anyone else living downtown or whatever your precinct polling location is. But if you live on campus, so historically, voting for students who live on campus was always at the hub. Now the county moved that, moved the location, and people are, of course, people get this in their mail too, notified of the precinct polling location change. But they moved that this will also be at the Bryce Jordan Center. It's not the same as early voting. The big thing about the BJC is just because of all the space there is, it is a fantastic space to be using or to be utilizing for multiple election procedures, just to make sure we're doing this as safely as possible. And so anybody who lives on campus, what they'll do is if you want to vote in person on Election Day, as long as you are registered to vote here, that's the big thing. You got to make sure you're registered to vote in Center County. But as long as you are, anytime during the day, you can just go to the Bryce Jordan Center. And of course, there will be signs everywhere telling you where to go once you get there. But yeah, your polling station, there are now two precincts. So previously there used to be, depending on which dorms you lived in, there were multiple precincts within the State College borough. And then there was a line where a couple dorms like furthest east were considered College Township. It's just a municipal line. What the county did to make this easier was they took all of the campus precincts that were within the State College borough and consolidated them into one. And then the College Township one is still as is. So now there are just two voting precincts for anybody on campus. So it'll be much easier to know which line you're getting into. And then all you have to do is it's voting as anybody else would. You just show up between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. on Election Day at the Bryce Jordan Center.
And just a follow up for that, what do I need to take with me to vote in person?
They just need to validate a signature. This will be the first time that you are voting in a new precinct. You will need some form, and it can be literally any kind of ID.
How will the coronavirus affect in-person voting?
We do have the emergency order in place from the governor, but we do not have legislation that became law mandating masks. So it's a tricky legal situation where technically, like, a poll worker cannot turn somebody away who's refusing to wear a mask. But they are going to heavily encourage it, especially on campus. They're going to be like, I think they just really need to be on people about that. I can assure you, poll workers and anybody outside on the premises, but anybody with the county, they are going to have full protective gear. And there is going to be hand sanitizer, people wearing gloves. It is going to be, on the worker side, it's going to be as safe as possible. And they're just, everybody is going to be stressing, like, show up with your mask, do not cause a scene. But ultimately, and social distancing will absolutely be in place, and that's going to be a very easy thing to do with the amount of space there is at given precincts, especially the BJC, but also just the amount of mail-in ballots that have already been requested, and we expect to see up until the deadline. That's going to take away from a lot of in-person turnout. So I think it's going to be done pretty effectively that way. There are drop boxes stationed pretty much all over. They just look like kind of mailboxes, but prettier. They're like very American, like red, white, and blue. They say Center County Government. Big secure ballot drop box sign. One of the easiest ones that are going to be for students, like by default, the one at the State College Municipal Building, it's right out front. You cannot miss it. That's probably going to be the easiest one. They expect to have, or they've been working on getting one at the hub, but there's just another series of logistics that the county has to work through with the university to make that work. It has to do with getting a new surveillance system in, everything like that to make sure it's secure. And so they're still shooting for like around the 19th or 20th to get that set up, but it's still to be announced right now. Those would be two of the most important ones. There's also, because there's student housing very heavily in neighboring townships of Ferguson and Patton Township, they're big student housing complexes. So in both of those municipal buildings, basically right outside the police department within the municipal buildings, there will be a drop box in both of those areas as well. And then for places elsewhere in the county, the Center County Government building, the Willowbank building in Bellefonte, there's one there, and that was the one that we had in the primary. There is one in the Spring Township Municipal Building, which is right by there. It's a neighboring township there. And then there is also one in the district magistrate judge office in Center Hall. That's more out towards the valley area of Center County. And there is one up in Phillipsburg, which is more of that's over the mountain. There's going to be one in the district judge office there too. I don't believe I missed any. No, that's it. But what's really, so the ones I mentioned, the State College Borough, the eventual hub one, the Ferguson Township and Patton Township, those are going to be really critical, I think, for students. Those are going to be the closest, depending on where you live. And this is, for people who are curious just about the safety, security, logistics of these drop boxes, legal experts can make an argument that this is actually a more secure process than anything, just given the amount of surveillance. They have 24-hour surveillance systems that are being monitored. The reason you'll know they're in county, they're either in some form of government office or right outside of it. So it'll either be outside of a municipal government building or a judge's office. So there's surveillance systems in place. And for the municipal governments especially, there's the police stations there, and there's somebody there 24/7. So in addition to surveillance systems that are being monitored, there is also there's also actual law enforcement, like somebody is physically present. And these are on weekdays, they're emptied every single day. I would say, I think all of them are 24/7 access, except I think the judge office in Phillipsburg, that one is only business hours, but I doubt that's really going to apply to students. So, for ones pertaining to you guys, really they're going to be 24/7 access and very easy to spot outside of a building.
What's it been like to try to get people to go out and vote in State College and Center County in general, especially in 2020 with, COVID going on and with this political climate. Like Ezra, especially for you, like, can you imagine what it would have been like to run your campaign this year instead of in 2018?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, but Matt, since the election, I've stayed very involved in local politics and worked closely with our Center County slate of Democratic candidates. Last year, also with Laura, we got some amazing people reelected, like our Center County commissioners, Mike Pipe and Mark Higgins. And this year, I'm actually working very closely with Peter Buck, who is a candidate for PA House in the 171st district. So I've stayed very involved in watching the candidates this year campaign in an environment where you can't hold an event in person. You can't knock on doors and talk to people face to face. It's been remarkable. And the way that everybody's kept their energy up, their enthusiasm. We do engage so much. We've had just hundreds of Zoom events, and Zoom, we can all get a little burnt out, but it's a great way to have a very intimate connection with people that you may not be able to see in person. So I've seen candidates step up and really engage, and we do things in person as long as we're masked and distanced. And so it's not that you have nothing where you get to see another human being, but we're also doing lit drops. So we're out there. We're not knocking doors right now because God forbid somebody has COVID or, we just contact tracing and just communicating around that would be too difficult. But what we are doing is we're going to every door in these districts and we're dropping literature on the door that provides information so people know that they're involved in the process. We're thinking about them and they have that information. Different year. I mean, I love seeing people. I love being in a room with people. That was one of the greatest joys. The parades. I mean, the parades were just so fun, and you could just honestly, you could shake like hundreds of people's hands in a day. But so we're missing that, but we're not missing the human connection. So I think just you got to be creative and do your best with it. And these candidates this year have done an incredible job.
Honestly, just making sure people have the right information that they need to vote. And that's something, that's something I think county government and a lot of different groups are working really hard on.
Absolutely. What you guys are doing just with this podcast is so important. Just having the information, like Laura said, we're really grateful to you for doing this because there's so much information we have to absorb around the election. And a lot of people have a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, and but just having the details about how to vote, the mechanics of it is so important. So thank you for doing this. But yeah, it's still a very human process. We're just doing it a little bit differently.
And would you say your overall reception has been pretty positive? Do people seem excited still to get into politics and to vote?
People are so engaged. I mean, there's so much energy, and my personal feeling about campaigning and about just elections and all of this process in general is let's focus on the positives. Let's focus on what we care about, on the vision about what we want to achieve together and how we can find common ground. So that's, there are things you're going to be upset about. That's part of what this is about, because voting is how you make your voice heard. The Constitution gives every one of us, we're citizens, power, and that power is our vote. So we have power, and if you're upset about something, use your power to change it. But we also try to connect around things that people care about. What are your guys' impressions? I mean, on campus, how are you feeling the vibe is amongst, people who want to vote, or what's the atmosphere from your perspective?
This is personally the first time that I'll be able to vote in the presidential election. So,
wow.
And I think that a lot of people are in that same boat with me. So I'm excited. And I think that there's just kind of a general buzz about being able to have a say in what happens more than what we have right now. Because in 2016, I was 16, so I couldn't vote. But I think that a lot of people now are in college, and this new generation coming in is really passionate about how they feel, and more now than ever, more interested in politics, which I think is important.
That's awesome.
You mentioned briefly 2016 election. We saw Pennsylvania as this swing state that ultimately played out to be very pivotal in the turnout of the election. So Can you guys speak a little bit to what that means and to how important Pennsylvania is in this upcoming election, November 3rd?
Yeah, I think first too, just to give some context too, I was just looking at it. 2016 was the first time Pennsylvania went Republican since 1988 when it went for George Bush Sr. So really for a lot of, college students' lifetimes, Pennsylvania has always been a blue state. So I think for a lot of us, seeing it go red in 2016 was a huge sort of surprise. Nobody was really expecting that.
PA is very important. It's one of the 6 largest states in terms of electoral votes. So if we're just purely talking about the presidential election, the Electoral College is where all of the state's popular vote is counted, and then whoever wins the popular vote gets the electoral votes. That's in theory how it works. We have 20 electoral votes in PA, so big state, right? A lot of votes. I mean, some of the smaller states, a lot of them have 3 votes. So this could be the equivalent of 6 or 7 other states. That's how many votes are here in Pennsylvania. And in terms of voter registrations and overall ballots, it's fairly close. It's kind of a purple state, right? So your vote really matters. In PA, you can actually swing this one way or another. So in terms of just purely like the mechanics for presidential, and I just want to throw in a plug here for the other elections on the ballot. You've got to vote every single race on the ballot because Pennsylvania, the General Assembly in Harrisburg, we have, in Washington, we have the Congress, the U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate. We have the same kind of structure in Harrisburg that determines statewide budgets and statewide laws and statewide policies that affect everything from how much you pay for school, to the debt, to your access to health care, what kind of jobs are available. So, yeah, PA is important in the presidential election. It's pivotal, but every vote matters because policies that affect all of us so profoundly are made in Harrisburg as well. So.
What can politicians do to reach out to the younger people, like Sam said, the people that were 16 years old, 17 years old in 2016 and are now voting for the first time, or maybe even 18 in 2016 and just weren't really big into politics and didn't really know what they were doing? So how can politicians reach out to these young people and make them feel more a part of the political process?
High school students, college students are leaders. Things that I've seen in terms of when things have happened, certain protests like Black Lives Matter, I've gone to protests and I've heard young people, of 16 years old speak about things where I said, this is what we need to be listening to and doing. Think protests after school shootings. And so as somebody who's involved in politics, I think it's important to go and listen to high school students and college students and appreciate what's being said because the future is there, and the ideas that are coming out of our high schools and colleges are really important for us to listen to. I also personally make it a point to go on campus. This year it's been a little different, of course, with COVID, but attend meetings of the college Democrats and just connect with generally with students because man, you guys are so important to this process. You're voters. You're voters now. So this is, anyway. So I think it's important to be there and to really listen and take it to heart what's being said by people in high school and college at every level. Whether you're a voter, whether you're elected to office, your vote on legislation, on budget, on resolutions that affirm things like diversity and inclusivity. This is power. So. Yes, your vote is actual power. As Laura said, it's just couldn't say it any more perfect than that. So you have the power to change and influence and direct your government. And that's so important.
I think one of the big issues too about getting out the vote is just how hard it can be sometimes for people to actually vote. Because election day isn't a federal holiday or anything, so a lot of people have to work all day. I know students, for example, we have classes that we have to make. It's like, do I vote or do I stay for the lecture so I can get 100% on the test next week? Suddenly voting just becomes something that you have to make time for instead of something that everybody should have time for. Election day, at least in my mind, should be almost like the celebration of the democratic process. It's like the perfect day for a federal holiday. You'd think, it's the soul of America. But things are kind of hard for people to vote a lot of times due to those obligations. You'd think even, it should be as easy as just logging onto a secure government website and pressing a button for who you want to vote for. But apparently, we still haven't figured that out yet. So what can you guys talk about in terms of how to make it easier for people to vote and to sort of make that process less difficult and less complicated?
There's been pressure on the university specifically for years to cancel classes on election day, to just make that a university holiday. That would do wonders. They should do that. There's no reason there's no excuse for why they haven't done that yet. And I'm just gonna plug that forever.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge as well what you said. We want to enfranchise and empower voters. I think universal voting would be so great for this country. I think having a holiday, saying, yes, this is a moment where we come together as a nation and we all cast our votes and work together to decide the future of our country. We could have a more just, a more fair, a more prosperous country for everybody who lives here. So I want to acknowledge what you said. I completely agree. We need to make the right to vote a centerpiece of our lives, and that day should be almost sacred in a way, sort of in a kind of secular way. Like that's an important day for our nation. So completely agree. And to just echo what Laura said, fortunately, we have some mechanisms in place that allow you to vote if voting on election day is difficult. And I know I'm voting by mail this year because it's important that we show that we trust the process, and I do. And there are people who cannot easily vote on election day. My mother, for example, she doesn't live in PA, but she's 80. And if her health would be placed at risk by going to a polling place, well, then I want her to vote by mail if she can. So I'm doing it partly to just affirm that this is a way you can vote. So if you have stress about election day, register by the 19th, apply for mail-in ballot as soon as possible by the 27th at the latest, and take care of business so your vote can be counted.
My dad actually did a similar thing. Pretty much every option is accessible for him, even just voting in person. But he decided, I was going over his options of making a plan to vote, and he was like, no, he's like, I got to get that mail-in ballot. I'm going to go to a drop box. He's like, I'm going to tell everybody about it. And he's like, we're going to just show everybody how this process works. And I was like, absolutely, rad, Dad. Like, you're the best. But I think that's very cool that people, especially who are privileged enough to have, be able to play with any option or work with any options that we have now that are just really hyped about like the new, more accessible ways that we can cast our ballot and want to get that word out. There's a lot of different kind of like fear tactics and misinformation going out. It's very important to reassure people how secure and timely things are working.
There's one thing I want to say. There's a website called votespa.com. It's an official Commonwealth of Pennsylvania website, a government website, nonpartisan. It's a government site, votespa.com. If you have any questions, am I registered to vote? Where am I registered? How do I register? How do I get a mail-in ballot? What's election day? Where can I vote? Where's my polling place? All these questions, this stuff, there's so much information. This website has all of that. So even if after this Zoom, if you forget something we've said, you can always go to that website and look it up. And it will link you to the online voter registration. It will link you to where your polling place is, where you're registered. It's all there. So that's really key because there's a lot of information. There's one place where you can find all that information. So
Laura and Ezra, thank you guys so much for your time. This has been an awesome discussion, and I hope the people listening to this podcast are now very much well informed and know exactly what to do to make sure their voices are heard. Thanks again, guys.
You're welcome, Matt, Matthew, Sam. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. It's really a privilege to be here, and thanks everybody for watching and being engaged. And let's all vote. You
guys working to make sure this information gets directly to the student body is just that is just such a huge service. Vote 2020.
Okay, everyone, that was our excellent interview with Laura Shadle and Ezra Nanes. I know I was super excited to talk to them. I felt like the talk went awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it.
Absolutely. I hope everyone listening is now very well informed about what they need to do to vote and how to do it and all of the steps they need to take.
We just want to echo that no matter who you're voting for this election, it's very important for you to go out and vote. So we hope that this helped you in your process, and hope you enjoyed listening to us.